So this is going to contain big spoilers for the Bands of Mourning, the third book in Mistborn Era 2, so you need to stop watching right now if you don't want any spoilers. So, is Kelsier alive? Finding that man at the end with the scratches all on his arms like Kelsier had. But we know he definitely died. His bones were used by the Kondra to imitate him after he died, to put his plan into effect, and so that the religion grew up all around him. He definitely died, so it can't be him. He definitely left the physical realm, and from other Cosmere books we know there's also a spiritual realm and the cognitive realm, and when you die I assume you go to the spiritual realm. But how, once you've lost that contact with your body, and your body is all bones and stuff, you can't come back, especially looking like you used to look 300 years ago. And why would he want to come back? Because I assume when he died, he was able to see Mare, his wife, and so why would he want to come back? Or if there's a great need, maybe he came back. But how? And why now? And why not at the end of the world in Mistborn Era 1? I always thought it was a very brave thing to do, to kill off Kelsier, and very powerful as well, with everything that, and that was the only reason why all the events occurred afterwards, because his death had such a powerful effect. So what would be the point of bringing back Kelsier? Because he wasn't particularly, I mean, he was charismatic, but he wasn't particularly special in terms of ability. I mean, Vin eclipsed him in terms of allomantic ability and things in the end. So, but his charisma was tied to his relationships and that special bond between all the crew, and all the crew members are now dead. So, and that was the great thing about Kelsier, all his relationships with Breeze, Ham, Dox. So 300 years in the future, he wouldn't know anyone. I don't know why he would be brought back now, and whose side would he even be on? So that was the first thing that blew my mind. The second thing that sort of blew my mind a bit was the woman that approached Wax at the party and talked to him, who seems to be from a different planet. She called the planet that Mistborn is all set in Scadrial. And the only place where I've ever come across that name, Scadrial, before is in Isles of the Emberdark. In none of the Mistborn books, Era 1 or 2 so far, have we ever come across this planet that the whole Mistborn series is taking place in is called Scadrial. That's never been mentioned before, but it seems to be this planet's name. But now I'm worried, because in Isles of the Emberdark, which is far in the future, I assume, from this point in history, the people from Scadrial seem to be the bad guys. I mean, when I was listening to Isles of the Emberdark, in my head, the Scadrians were the bad guys. From that, I was thinking Rasharan's good, Scadrian's bad, and it was obviously setting up the whole big battle in the future between Scadrial and Rashar, and they were the two big players in the future. But what Scadrial was doing to Sixth of the Dusk's planet was horrific. So they were the bad guys in that situation. So it makes me really sad that all these people who we love in the Mistborn era, the people in the future of that planet, turn into the bad guys. And so many things now in this book and that future I'm making connections with, because those people the ones from above in Isles of the Emberdark, they had, was it helmets or masks and metal in their faces, and that seems to be a natural progression for where things are now in Mistborn, and this new southern continent which has now come into play. In the Bands of Mourning, we've just been introduced to this whole other previously unknown southern continent where people have been living in this Mistborn world without us knowing, and they wear masks and technologically advanced. So I'm worried for these characters now in Mistborn Era 2, because they are against sort of these people coming from the southern continents, and it makes me think that the people from the southern continents are going to win, and so that's why we are seeing in the future people with masks, because those are their cultural traditions. Unless the people from the southern continent and the northern continent in Scadrial mixed together, and so just the cultural traditions get blended. But the people in the two continents, I think, must have different physiology, because the people in the southern continent had adapted to greater heat, and so when the rest of the world was saved by harmony, and the ash clouds was stopped and the planet was moved back to where it was before the Lord Ruler messed it up, he saved the lives of all the people of the northern continent and made the conditions better for them and made the perfect conditions in that basin where they live now. And it was mentioned before that because everything was so perfect, Harmony now wonders whether that set them back, because they don't ever really explore or innovate much because everything is perfect as it is. Whereas these people in the southern continent seem to have advanced a lot quicker because of the need to survive and make ways to survive, and they've innovated, and they have airships, which seems like it could easily lead in the future to space travel. But it also makes me wonder what the people in the southern continent are wanting, because what was the Save the World event for the people in the northern continent was a disaster for the people in the southern continent. And so are the people in the southern continent wanting to return to that sort of a level, bring the world back to what it was, but which would be a disaster for the peoples of the northern continent? And would Trell, we don't know if Trell is an old god of Scadrial. It implies that it might be a more cosmic thing, because when Wax and Harmony were talking together and Harmony was showing he had like a bubble of protection around Scadrial against this red light that was trying to come in, and Harmony was protecting them. So it seems to be that this Trell, or whatever shard it may be, who's trying to challenge Harmony, is an interplanetary thing in the Cosmere. It was Miles, wasn't it, who mentioned about the people of red and gold, and also the red glowy eye things. So the only people we've encountered with red glowing eyes in the Cosmere is the fused, and so I don't know if it has anything to do with that. And Odium, who turned into Retribution. Oh, my mind is... But no, at that point in the timeline, Odium was trapped in the planetary system, in the Rasharan planetary system, wasn't he? So I don't think it would be Odium. It would have to be a different shard, a different bad guy shard. But the red glowing eyes is a thing of, well, was a thing of the fused and Odium. But maybe that's just something that all shards do. And what's up with the Lord Ruler? Apparently after he died, he went to the southern continent, but he would have been dead. So how is that possible? What is he doing? What's happened to him now? And so putting the Bands of Mourning in a safe place. But I still am completely confused with the situation with the Kundra. In Mistborn Era 1, it was made very clear that taking out the spike, their blessing, killed them forever, and that was the big sadness, that they were saving everyone by stopping themselves being influenced by ruin by taking out their spikes, and that would lead to the end of their race, their culture, their history and everything, by turning them into mistwraiths, and there was no way of bringing them back after they've turned into mistwraiths. But in Mistborn Era 2, without offering any explanation, they're not dead, they've come back from being mistwraiths somehow, and we're not offered any explanation of how that's happened. And now they seem to have, well, at least two spikes, one that stops them being mistwraiths, and another with all their memories and logic and rational thought, which if you take out, they turn insane, which is what Part Arm happened to in Relore when he had that second spike taken out. But was something else going on with Part Arm, because it was mentioned slightly that she was no longer under the influence of Harmony and someone else. She was under the influence of someone else. And if it's not Ruin, then is it Trell? And how would that be possible? And just coming back to Kelsier briefly, I wonder if something to do with hemalurgy, whether that could bring someone's soul back from the spiritual realm into a physical body, but that wouldn't be a good thing necessarily. And so with the Kelsier that we encounter, this alive Kelsier that seems to be there, would he be a force for good or bad? In the Stormlight archive, people could come back from the dead as a fused if they had a host body to go into. So has Kelsier somehow done something similar to that? But then how would he be in the same body? It was 300 years ago. And then Wax finally had it out with Harmony, and they thrashed it out a bit about all the struggles that Wax has been having with regard to how much Harmony intervenes and what is left to free will, and, you know, the classic thing of anyone who of any faith has to wrestle with at some point, with suffering in the world and God. But I felt that Harmony's points were rather poor. There are way better things that you could argue, and I know that Wax is coming from a position of pain and grief and anger, so it's not necessarily helpful in that raw state to just tell people theological points and things. But the only way you could trust any God would be to be sure that you had free will and that the God wasn't interfering at all, which means the God couldn't interfere even with the people who were doing bad things and causing suffering and killing and doing horrific things. So God can't interfere in order that humans trust him, because they need to be sure that they're not being influenced or they're being minds being so they're basically not slaves to God's will. Also, Steris is awesome. She's always been awesome. I've always loved her. She's great. Mercy, what was done with her character, I didn't feel it very believable when for the reason that was given for her giving up the Bands of Mourning, of, oh, this isn't me. But everything up till now has led us to believe that is her, that she is wanting, you know, to fight crime and be that person who can make a difference and does have the power to do something and be something other than just someone who's tagging along and just luggage, because she thinks at the moment she's just a tool that Wax sometimes just picks up and then disregards as and when needed, and so she's wanting to be useful, and so it makes sense that she would keep the Bands of Mourning to herself. But if the reason given for her giving up the Bands of Mourning was to save Wax, which it sort of was, but that wasn't the reason that was said, then that would make sense for her character, because I think she would save Wax. I've heard that you have to read Mistborn, the Secret History, before going on to the Lost Metal, so I shall be doing that. But now, to think of it, is that going to be all to do with Kelsier? Oh, I really don't, if he is alive, I don't know how I feel about that, because although I loved Kelsier and his charisma, I also think it was a really powerful thing for him to be properly dead. So I don't know how I feel about him being alive if he is. But anyway, yes, I'm very looking forward to going on to Secret History and then the Lost Metal. If you enjoyed this video, please consider going to gofundme.com/SaveJenny, where I'm fundraising for life-saving neurosurgery. Thank you.